Okay, so we're back again. Last time we managed to build the entire sort of back structure, and we've got a microcontroller on here. Time now for us to start working on the front structure, which is mainly this part of here. There's some complication basically surrounding this very small region, so we're going to get started. So the parts you're going to need for this are these bearings. These are the F687s. You can also use these, but what I actually prefer the other ones because these are 6.807, whereas the inner bit is 5, which actually matches with basically the rest of the dimensions. So I prefer the Fs. The other bearings I'm using, particularly for the steering part of it, are these small ones. Actually, I got the numbers wrong. These are the 687s. These are the 608s. Okay, but I'm describing those fairly well on the website. You also need to print these standoffs. These are 32 millimeters. And you also need to print these babies that will basically steer your car. And lastly, you're gonna need nuts and bolts, and we're talking 40 millimeters here. And there's these magic little things I'm just gonna put over here. These basically help you. They have a little bit here around them, and they basically clamp onto this speed. If you notice, there's a little bit of a hole there, and they clamp right on top. So let's see how everything hangs together. So we're going to start off by, if you look at these miniature bearings, they slide right through here like so, and they should just fit perfectly. So we're going to go ahead and just fit in the bearings and then carry on from that. So all the bearings are now nice and tight, as you can see here, and I've also basically fitted the 687s on here. Since not as aligned as I would like it to be. What I've also done is basically fit these on here. Right, this is basically where the wheel will go, so we want it to be as frictionless as far as possible. If you look at this, if I can take it out again, it's got a little bit of rough edge over here that allows the bearing to just fit in very nicely. If you imagine this will be on the other side, maybe this side, so we need to make sure that they're on opposite sides. So this will be on the other side, nice and tight, fits perfectly, and it's tight. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fit this onto the bottom structure. You're just going to have to push it in, but it has to be free flowing. Quite important for this thing to just be free flowing as far as possible, and the bearing will do most of that job. And it just so happens, let's just quickly see, this one looks like this, so it needs to be on the outer. And let's see, yeah, perfect. Now it's starting to take shape, and obviously I need to just sand this a little bit. And by the way, this is basically your servo will move this left and right to control the steering, and this will fit in here like this. And remember this little gizmo over here, it plugs on top using these self tippers. So this little shaft thingy basically plugs into this part like so, and we're gonna go ahead and try and screw this on. So like I said, use the self tappers for this, and there's already a hole that's already drilled for you, so let's just get it in there nice and easy. I don't think we need to apply too much force, because I don't really believe that these need to be that tight in any case. So I made these holes as wide as far as possible, just so that you can secure this without necessarily restricting the movement. And we can do the same for the other piece. So all put together, now your structure looks something like this, right? So the bearings are doing a bit to reduce the friction. I might in future versions basically decide to use bearings. We're just going to have to see how much space there is to be able to do something like that, but don't quote me on that. So for now, it's working, it's happy. So far we've managed to connect this, and it's kind of moving as it should without too much friction. What we then do, sorry about that, is we basically push this part onto it, and again we haven't really compromised on the friction, so this is still pretty much mobile as it should be. Now if you look at what we've got here, we've got stand-ups basically to fit in these areas and hold this tight. And what we're gonna do, so we're not gonna put the stand-ups just yet. What we're gonna cover next is where the server goes and getting it nice and tight. But obviously, we can start to see potentially where the server will go. This little thing has to be sort of in line with the two edges as a point of origin to steer this bit over here. So it needs to be pointing down like that. So what I'm gonna do offline is just go through and connect it up, but before I do that, we're going to be using either this or that. I prefer the longer one purely because of the distance. So let me actually take it out. So because the distance between this point and that point, that's the closest one. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So what I've done offline is basically tighten up the screws on the servo. So these little holes are quite small enough to just push these small screws. They'll actually just attach themselves without the requirement for nuts. So what we're going to do next is, if you imagine that the servo is facing down, this piece goes onto it like that, and this piece has to then attach to this part. But what we're going to do is, let's do this part first, and how we're going to do it is, if you imagine servo's pointing down, holding on to this thing, we need a screw from underneath and into one of these points, and that's how we're going to tighten or get this thing fixed so it can start driving this piece. So this part is done. There we go. It's important that this piece be as free flowing back and forth as far as possible, so that the servo can actually drive this thing quite freely without too much friction. So we're then gonna go ahead and push this in, and offline. Still, what I'm gonna do is just start tightening up everything else, and I realized just now that I've got this thing switched the other way around, so I'm gonna switch it so that it faces this direction, matching this guy over here. I'm gonna start basically applying these stand-offs just so that it's nice and solid and bound together. So you're going to end up with a structure like this, with your pillars basically facing up and ready to support this whole frame. So the next bit is basically to bring in this guy over here. Well, actually I've got this all wrong again. So this guy needs to be facing front like this and that, so that when this guy comes on, you basically need to do a lot of things simultaneously. Number one, you're going to make sure that the servo at the bottom, and again, your servo point has to be in line with these two, right, as a point of origin, and that plugs in nicely into the servo arm over there, and that's going to control your steering arm. This little hole obviously plugs in there. Your bearing holds this piece over here. At the same time, you need to plug in the servo to its arm. So let's do that and see how it goes. So our front piece seems to be coming together very nicely. Now we've managed to bolt on these front two, and just to show you, you can see the servo squeaking in the background as I push these. Basically the servo will then take over and start pushing these left and right as you steer the car. So job well done so far. What I'm gonna just quickly do after this is just show you how you can attach your front wheels, and obviously they're not driving wheels, so we'll see how we achieve that. So the last bit here is to put the tires on. Let's see how that works. I've opted for these just to challenge myself, but then I've gone and designed this. Basically, I call it drive wheel converter, and it plugs in on this, and you end up with something that looks like this. So you can then just plug in this bearing, and it's just obviously I didn't plug it all the way, so it's not exactly straight, but it can basically rotate within a bearing. But this bearing is exactly the same as this one over here, which means with a bit of force you can get this tire on here, and hopefully it is straight. So we're gonna get it straight just now, but it spins freely. And obviously on the other side you can use these babies to cap it all off. So, and you can use the self tipper screws, goes in here, and it basically fits on the other side of the wheel, that side. Thanks for watching.